Hey there, time drifters. Welcome to Snooze Through Time, the channel that helps you drift off to sleep while accidentally learning more about the past than you ever did in school. I'm your host, and tonight we're heading back to the Middle Ages because nothing says bedtime story like war, childbirth, and suspicious herbal teas. If this is your first time here, make yourself cozy. If you're a returning listener, you already know the drill. Like this video to appease the mysterious algorithm spirits, subscribe so you don't miss the next historical nap ride, tap the bell like you're summoning a peasant council at dawn, and drop a comment about what era you'd like to snooze through next. So grab your blanket, relax your jaw, and prepare to slide into a medieval dreamscape. Time to dim the torches and begin the journey. The Middle Ages, where buildings were made of stone, diseases were made of vibes, and women were made of stress. Welcome to the least feminist time period your high school never warned you about, the medieval era. Today, we'll explore what it meant to be born female, in a time when your social rank decided your destiny. Your clothes were laced by the gods of inconvenience, and your job title was either wife or witch. We'll follow three recurring characters to help us on this noble and highly problematic journey. Lady Lux, born into nobility, destined for a life of luxury, politics and polite emotional repression. Crafty Clara, our merchant class gal, who knows how to spin wool and spin rumours. And Muddy Maud, our peasant heroine, whose entire life smells like cabbage and perseverance. Ready your goblets and lower your expectations. This is a woman's life in the Middle Ages. Let's start at the very beginning. Being born. If you were born into nobility, congratulations. You're already more valuable than most farm animals. You'll be wrapped in imported linens, fed by someone else's breasts, and monitored by a woman called a wet nurse, who basically does all the parenting. Your mother may or may not show up once a month to say something vague like, "She looks healthy," before retreating to a chamber full of peacock feathers and wine. You'll have toys carved from ivory, and by age 3, you'll already be promised to a man you've never met, whose portrait resembles a melted wax candle. This is considered a great match. Now, if you were born into the merchant class, life's a bit less shiny but much more hands-on. Your toys are functional, miniature brooms, tiny looms, and the occasional wooden doll if business was good. Your parents expect you to help the family trade by the time you can walk. Literacy is on the table, if you're lucky, and male siblings aren't hogging the books. As for our beloved Muddy Maud, born into a peasant family, life begins in a literal pile of hay. She's swaddled in burlap, probably baptized in freezing water, and handed her first chore before she can speak. There is no nursery, just a shared room, a lot of livestock, and one blanket everyone fights over. Playtime? That's just chores with imagination. The teenage years, also known as the countdown to marriage in medieval terms, because once you hit puberty, your value skyrockets like a hormonal turnip at market. Let's check in with our trio. Lady Lux, now a tender 13, has officially entered what noble society refers to as marriageable, and what modern society would refer to as highly illegal. She's been packed off to another noble household for training, which is medieval code for learning how to pour wine with grace and survive in-law politics without crying. She's expected to learn the following skills: embroidery so detailed it can only be seen under divine light, playing the lute badly but prettily, and being so quiet that you're basically furniture. Meanwhile, behind every tapestry, she's practicing the real skills. Spotting who's cheating, On whom, memorizing family alliances and learning which cousin she's accidentally engaged to. Her father is brokering her marriage like she's a prize horse, evaluating lineage, land, and how much gold the other family's throwing in. Romantic, right? Clara, our savvy merchant teen, has more freedom, but also more pressure. She's learning the ropes of the family business, which might be weaving, brewing, or yelling confidently in markets until people buy things they didn't want. She can read, she can write, and she can mentally calculate interest rates while stirring stew. Her parents are deciding whether she should marry into another merchant family for trade alliances, take over the shop if her brothers die, or join a convent because, hey, free room, board, and no husbands. Clara daydreams about love, adventure, and maybe a life without 14-hour workdays. But mostly, she's trying to avoid being married off to the neighbor's son, who smells like eels and keeps trying to explain money to her. And Muddy Maud? She's basically a full-grown woman by medieval standards. At 14, she's strong, enough to carry 3 buckets, milk a goat in the dark, and throw a rock with deadly accuracy. She's probably already betrothed, likely to a boy she grew up with who once dared her to eat a frog. The local priest will mumble something Latin over them in a mud-drenched ceremony and boom, married. Maud's education is entirely survival-based. Don't get kicked by livestock, don't drink the green water, and don't make eye contact with tax collectors. She's also learning the most important skill of all, how to carry deep existential dread while shelling peas. Despite their different worlds, each of these young women is facing the same existential riddle. What's the least awful option available to me, and how do I survive it without dying, marrying an idiot, or catching fire? And now that they've hit the age of uncomfortably eligible, it's time for their debut on the marriage market. Welcome to the marriage market, where love is optional, dowries are mandatory, and no one is here for the right reasons. In the Middle Ages, marriage wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a business transaction, a power play, and sometimes just a way to combine sheep herds. Let's see how our ladies are faring. Lady Lux is now between the ages of 14 and 17, which, in noble time, means she's aging like unrefrigerated cheese. She's finally being married off, probably to a man twice her age with 1 working kidney and a family crest featuring a screaming goose. The wedding is an event. There's a feast, a procession, and an awkward public bedding ceremony, because nothing says romance like watching your cousins shove you into a room with a stranger while everyone sings lute ballads outside. The dowry her family provides is substantial. Land, jewels, some kind of rare tapestry featuring biblical guilt. And in return, her husband gets full access to her womb, her wardrobe, and anything she was allowed to legally own before this point, which is mostly embroidery hoops. Emotionally, she prepares herself by staring into the fireplace for several hours a day while whispering, "It's fine, everything's fine." Clara's courtship involves a little more back and forth. Her parents have lined up suitors ranging from mildly charming baker to this guy owns a warehouse. Clara is expected to smile, ask 0 questions, and say yes to whoever offers the best combination of status, stability, and not being actively cursed. There's a chance Clara may like her husband, but no one's holding their breath. Love is a bonus, kind of like free spices with your wool order. If the marriage goes through, her dowry might include bolts of cloth, a spinning wheel, or a share in the family stall at market. Her wedding dress? Practical. Her expectations? Lower than a peasant's roofline in winter. Still, Clara has her eye on the future. If she plays her cards right, She'll be running her own shop and her husband's life within a year. Meanwhile, over in the peasant village, Maud's wedding is happening. Now, probably, maybe yesterday. It's hard to say. It was informal. The ceremony takes place behind a barn, officiated by a half-sober friar who also doubles as the village dentist. Witnesses include 2 goats and a guy who just wandered in looking for beer. There's no dowry unless you count a mostly functioning chicken coop. Maud's parents are just happy she's not marrying someone from the next village over, because they eat stew weird over there. Maud's husband is decent. He owns 2 tunics, has most of his teeth, and once punched a tax collector, so naturally he's a catch. Together they begin their new life in a single-room cottage, where romance means not stepping on each other's feet during chores, and only arguing a little bit when the thatch roof leaks. So, to recap, noble marriage is politics wrapped in pearls. Merchant marriage is strategy with a side of stress. Peasant marriage is survival with goats. Regardless of class, the medieval woman's married life is about to become one big juggling act of housework, pregnancies, and trying not to die before 30. Congratulations! You've made it to the next phase of your life, constant screaming. Whether noble, merchant, or peasant, motherhood in medieval Europe is less about gentle lullabies and more about, please don't die before your 3rd birthday, I'm begging you. Let's check in on our 3 maternal MVPs. Lady Lux has given birth, possibly multiple times. The records are unclear because women's health was considered about as important as tapestry maintenance. Her birth experience? Imagine giving birth in a room full of incense, religious chanting, confused midwives, and your mother-in-law loudly judging you from a nearby chair. Also, nobody's washed their hands since last harvest. If she survives, and that's a big if, her job is to produce at least 1 male heir, a couple of spare kids in case that one dies, and, ideally, a daughter to marry off for alliances. Think of it like medieval Pokemon breeding, but with higher stakes and less consent. Her children are raised by wet nurses, governesses, and tutors, while she spends her time managing her household, attending court, and quietly panicking every time a child coughs. Also, postpartum depression, not a thing people understood. If she seems sad, she's labelled melancholic and handed a cold compress or sent to pray until the feeling passes, or she does. Clara is now a businesswoman and a mother. She's expected to keep her household running, manage her husband's ledgers, and breastfeed while negotiating wool prices. No one tells her how to handle teething while managing inventory, or how to soothe a colicky baby during a guild dispute. She just figures it out, probably while stirring stew with one hand and catching vomit with the other. Her children are raised half in the shop and half in the kitchen, learning math from receipts and morality from street gossip. She'll teach her sons to read, and maybe, just maybe, her daughters, if nobody important finds out. There's no maternity leave, there's no childcare, but there is one weird herbal tonic that may or may not contain opium. Clara will outlive the average merchant husband by pure spite. Maud's experience of motherhood is raw, real, and entirely outdoors. There's no crib, just a box near the fire. No lullabies, just humming while she guts a fish. No diapers, just praying to St. Anyone that the baby holds it until she gets through milking. Childbirth? It happens in the same room as dinner prep. She bites down on a stick, a neighbor slaps her back, and someone yells push before heading back to the field. If she survives, she's expected to return to work by sundown. She has, on average, 6-10 children. Half survive. This is considered a win. Her toddlers learn to walk by chasing chickens and learn discipline by witnessing Maud throw a shoe at a rooster that looked at her wrong. Yet somehow Maud keeps them alive, fed and mostly unhaunted. Her secret, a terrifying glare and an iron will forged in peat smoke and peasant rage. Across all social classes, motherhood is a gauntlet. You're expected to be a chef, doctor, teacher, maid, midwife, and therapist. You have no modern medicine, no hygiene, and no help unless you count the occasionally reliable nun. You are absolutely, positively not allowed to complain, or you'll be labelled hysterical and treated with leeches. Still, these women power through, because if they don't, the whole system falls apart. A medieval society really can't function without someone making sure the children don't eat a candle. You've survived puberty, marriage, childbirth, and that one weird rash. Welcome to midlife. Or as it's known in the Middle Ages, wow, you're still alive. This is the era of managing households, surviving epidemics, and quietly plotting to outlive your enemies. Lady Lux is now in her 30s or, gasp, even her 40s. She's outlived 2 children, 1 husband, and an entire generation of questionable medical advice. If she's lucky, her husband died in a war or gout incident, and she now holds the coveted title of widow, which in noble circles is actually a promotion. She might run an estate, hold political influence, or even, if she's daring, sponsor a local monastery and not get burned at the stake. Widowhood gives her something she never had before, autonomy. She can control money, she can make decisions. She can say things like, "I think not, good sir," without checking with a man first. Of course, she's still judged harshly. Too quiet? She's grieving. Too chatty? She's plotting. Too fashionable? Witch? Too drab? Definitely witch. Basically, midlife Lady Lux walks a constant tightrope between power and being called a harlot by someone named Geoffrey. Clara is thriving and also falling apart. She's managing a business, 2 teenagers, a husband who still thinks helping means standing in the way, and a mother-in-law who won't die no matter how many cold breezes she's exposed to. She knows everyone's secrets. She knows who's cheating, who's skimming, and which nun used to be fun. She has more social power than half the town council, even if officially she's still just a merchant's wife. Her body, however, is done. Her back hurts. Her hands are calloused. She sleeps like a log, but wakes up more tired. Every solution involves vinegar or compresses, and none of it works, but she endures because no one else knows how to balance the accounts, teach the kids Latin, and clean out a chimney in the same afternoon. Midlife for Clara is all about silent competence. She doesn't get parades, but she is the reason her household hasn't collapsed into chaos. Maud, meanwhile, has become a village legend. She raised children, survived winter, argued with the miller, and won, and once chased off bandits with a rake and a prayer. Her hair is silver, her knees are ruined, and her hands look like they could strangle God. She's respected, feared, and deeply tired. She's become the village advice giver, bone setter, midwife, and amateur therapist. People bring her gifts in exchange for solutions. Is your cow acting weird? Ask Maud. Is your baby cursed? Ask Maud. Is your marriage failing? Don't ask Maud. She'll just tell you to build a new house and leave. If something goes wrong, she's the first one people call, and the first one they accuse of witchcraft when their crops fail. Because, she makes ointments and knows Latin words for plants. If Maud can survive the village gossip and outlive the plague, she might just get a peaceful retirement filled with knitting, scowling, and watching everyone else mess things up. In short, noble women may gain power, but it's always on a knife's edge of scandal. Merchants' wives run everything and get credit for none of it. Peasant women become one with the land, the people, and possibly the wind. And let's not forget the ever-present backdrop to midlife, the Black Death. Nothing spices up your 40s like a 60% chance of dying in a week from a flea bite. If you've made it to old age in the Middle Ages, congratulations! You've officially outlived 90% of your peers, 4 plagues, 7 wars, 3 husbands, and 1, really, suspicious cheese. But here's the twist. The older you get, the weirder people think you are. Let's check on our durable dames. Lady Lux is now what people politely call venerable. Her grandchildren are marrying, her bones creak like floorboards, and her social calendar is mostly funerals. If she's widowed, again, she might be living in a small wing of the castle, or a convent that smells faintly of regret. She still wears nice clothes, but now they're mostly black and heavily embroidered with judgment. She is, theoretically, respected, but also feared. People come to her for advice, but they also whisper that she talks to birds too much. She doesn't care. She's above it. She's reading religious texts, managing a small army of servants, and quietly making sure no one messes up the estate before she dies. On occasion, someone accuses her of poisoning her second husband, and she responds by blinking very slowly until they leave in shame. Clara has entered the final form of merchant matriarchy, the grandmother who controls everything from a chair. She's no longer involved in daily business, but she still knows every trade route, every marriage prospect, and every unpaid tab in town. She drinks weak beer, complains about taxes, and gives side-eye that can level a man at 50 paces. Her children run the shop now, poorly. Her grandchildren are either promising or disappointments, and she's not shy about which is which. She's earned respect through sheer endurance. She's too useful to ignore and too scary to cross. Her greatest power is silence. When Clara doesn't say anything, people panic. However, if she's too independent, too educated, or too mouthy, well, she might find herself in a bit of trouble, because there's one thing worse than being a powerful woman in the Middle Ages, and that's being a powerful old woman. Maud has become folklore. Children run when she coughs. Teenagers dare each other to touch her gate. The priest swears she's fine, but also refuses to eat anything she bakes. She's the village crone. Part midwife, part herbalist, part maybe witch. Yes, she talks to animals. Yes, she knows which mushrooms kill you. Yes, she once screamed at the clouds and they immediately cleared. None of this is helping her reputation. On good days, she's the wise woman everyone turns to for help, with childbirth or sick cows. On bad days, she's one goat fart away from being burned at the stake. And what did she do to deserve this? She didn't die, that's it, that's the crime. But Maud doesn't care. She's lived, she's fought, she's buried a dozen idiots, and she knows where the bodies are, literally and metaphorically. So what's the reward for reaching old age in medieval Europe? You get to outlive your enemies, you get to judge people full time, and you get a front row seat to the next generation making all the same mistakes, but with worse posture. Of course, you also get joint pain, deeply suspicious neighbours, and maybe a fun little witch trial if things get dull. But hey, by this point, you've survived everything. You'll survive this too, or haunt them forever. Either works. So, after a full hour of childbirth, plague, passive-aggressive embroidery, and suspicious goats, what have we learned? Are we better people? Probably not. Are we more informed? Debatable. Are we wildly impressed by women who survived? The Middle Ages with nothing but sheer grit and a prayer to Saint whoever the hell? Absolutely. Noble women taught us that life at the top still came with ankle-deep sexism and cousin marriages. That wearing 12 layers of fabric in the summer was somehow normal, and that being respectable didn't mean you had power. It just meant your cages were gilded. But they also showed us strategy. Noble women played long games. They brokered peace, ran estates, and outmaneuvered lords with one eyebrow raise and 3 carefully worded letters. They smiled at men they hated, named their daughters after saints, and made moves while pretending they were just doing needlepoint. Legends. Merchant women taught us that the middle class was where the chaos lived, that multitasking isn't a modern invention, and it was born the moment someone had to breastfeed and do inventory at the same time, and that success came not from luck, but from hustle, bartering, and knowing which baker was sleeping with whose wife. Merchant women were the glue that held society together. They ran shops, balanced books, trained kids, and invented side-eyes that could destroy a man's self-esteem. For generations, they didn't ask for power, they just took it, quietly, efficiently, and while roasting a chicken. Peasant women taught us that dignity doesn't require luxury, that strength isn't loud, it's stubborn, relentless, and sometimes covered in mud, and that if society forgets you exist, you can get a lot done while no one's watching. Muddy. Maud and her sisters taught us how to survive with nothing, how to laugh during famine, how to raise 10 kids while knee-deep in sheep, how to heal wounds with weeds and curses, how to endure. They were the earth. They were the roots. They were the reason villages didn't crumble like badly baked bread. So what's the legacy? It's not written in fancy books or carved into castle walls. It's in whispered stories, battered tools, stained aprons, and iron wills passed down like heirlooms. These women, noble, merchant, and peasant, weren't just background characters in some knight's tale. They were the story. They lived hard, they loved harder, and they carried entire civilizations on backs that never really got a day off. So the next time someone says history is about kings and battles, just smile. Then tell them about Lady Lux's revenge embroidery, crafty Clara's ledger of shame, and Muddy Maud's magical goat diplomacy. Because medieval women weren't just survivors, they were brilliant, brutal, resilient, and honestly, they were the baddest witches on the continent, whether or not they ever got caught. And that, fellow time drifters, was the surprisingly hardcore life of medieval women. If you're still awake, congrats. You're stronger than a 14th century widow with property rights. If you're asleep, well, I hope your dreams are full of scrolls, cats, and historically accurate flirting. Before you vanish into the ether, remember to like the video. If your brain absorbed even a smidge of medieval mayhem, subscribe for more time-traveling tales you didn't ask for but might just love, and leave a comment telling me your favorite historical fun fact or weird medieval lore. Bonus points if it involves soup. This has been Snooze Through Time, where we tuck you in with tales of yore, just a few plague jokes, and the gentle reminder that no matter how weird modern life gets, at least no one's accusing you of witchcraft because your bread rose too nicely. Sleep tight, time travel responsibly, and may your REM cycle be free of angry monks and goats with attitudes. Good night.